It began one day in the middle of summer when Josh was home alone with nothing to do. He had no friends who lived nearby, and the only way he could get to the mall was to be driven. So, more often than not, Josh was left to his own devices. Today, he was at a loss of what to do. He was tired of playing computer games, there was nothing worth watching on television, and he did not desire to spend any time reading. He was small of stature and body structure, genetic characteristics he had inherited from his mom, which ruled out many sports activities. In fact, he and his mom were approximately the same size, and he seemed to have stopped growing. His dad had died a few years ago in an auto accident. Mom had been left with enough money from the insurance settlement and her husband's investments that she and Josh could live comfortably. However, Elizabeth, Josh's mom, had chosen to continue her career as a mid-level advertising executive. She didn't want to just sit around at home, she wanted to remain active and involved. As he wandered about the house looking for something to do, Josh came upon the laundry basket, sitting just outside the laundry room, filled with clean clothes ready to be put away. Mom usually put the clothes away in the evening, but had not had the time to do so last night. Since his clothes were neatly folded and on top of the pile, Josh thought he would help Mom by putting them away. As he lifted his things out of the basket, his eyes fell upon a soft, silky slip in emerald green with lace all over. Instinctively, as if being magically drawn to it, he reached out and touched the satin garment. As he did so, he felt a strange electrifying sensation, one that he had never experienced before. Quickly, Josh broke hand and eye contact with the slip and stepped away from the basket. He did not know what to make of this and felt that if he went on and put his things away, he would forget about the feeling of touching the slip. He set out to put his things away, only to be drawn back to the laundry basket once he had completed the task. He gazed longingly at the slip, as if it were some strange siren calling to him. When he finally moved from his trance-like state, he reached down and picked up the slip by its straps, letting it unfold as he lifted it up. As if it were fate, under the slip were the matching satin bra, panties, and garter belt. Quickly Josh gathered up the rest of the lingerie and stood there feeling the smooth satin against his hands and arms. Instinctively, he knew that he had to try on these heavenly items. He retreated to his room, where he quickly undressed and then began to put the lingerie on. He figured if he hooked the bra in front of him and then slid it around and put the straps over his arms, he could get it on. He trembled with excitement as he put the garter belt on around his waist. He then stepped into the silky panties and drew them up around his legs. Once he had the panties and the slip on, he knew that he wanted to see himself in the full-length mirror in his mom's room. As he entered her room, he noticed a pair of her stockings lying on the dresser. Josh picked them up and felt their softness on his hands before he sat on the bed to put them on. On many occasions, he had observed his mom putting on her stockings when he passed her room and she had left the door slightly ajar. Now, he made sure that he did exactly as he had observed his mom doing. Carefully he slid one stocking over his foot and up his leg, making sure to properly attach the top to the garter tabs. Once Josh had that stocking secure, he repeated the process and then stood to look at his reflection in his mom's mirror. He could feel the tautness of the stocking pulling against the garters as he stood. With his longish hair and slight frame, Josh felt that he was looking at a teenage girl in the mirror instead of himself. As he savored this sensual experience, his one disappointment was that the bra hung limp and empty over his chest. Quickly he went to the dresser looking for some more of his mom's panties to properly fill the bra cups. He took several silky pairs of panties and placed them in his bra. He loved how it made him look like he had breasts. He then sat at his mom's vanity and briefly brushed his hair until it began to look more like a feminine hairdo. He again looked at his reflection in the full-length mirror and liked what he saw, from the enhanced breasts to the lingerie over his body to the style of his hair. Briefly, Josh turned away from the mirror and went to look in his mom's closet. He carefully looked through the blouses and skirts hanging there until he came upon the gold satin cocktail dress that his mom had worn on special occasions. He took it from the closet and removed it from its hanger. The feel of the satin dress in his hands increased his excitement. Carefully, he slid the dress over his head and put his arms into the short sleeves. He settled the dress over his body and then struggled to zip up the back. Josh could not have imagined how nice it would feel wearing his mom's satin things. Before he moved from the closet, he saw the gold 3-inch heels that went with the dress sitting on the closet floor. He picked them up, moved to the bed and sat down to put them on. He had observed his mom sweep the skirt of a dress under her when she sat down, and he now did the same thing. He slid his foot into the pointed toe pump and was pleased that it fit perfectly. Once the other heel was on, Josh made sure he was used to feeling the heels on his feet before trying to stand. When he did finally stand, he was a little wobbly, but he did manage to hold onto the dresser until he could stand easily and start to walk in the heels. He again looked in the mirror and observed his image. He knew that he felt good dressed like this, and his reflection confirmed that he looked good. He wanted to be totally feminine in appearance and apply makeup at this point, but he knew that his inexperience could easily be his undoing. He just decided to savor the feel of the satin against his body rather than try to be fully feminine all at once. Josh stayed dressed for almost 2 hours that first time. He moved to his room while dressed and began searching the web for more information about men that liked to wear dresses. He found all kinds of information, from story sites to articles to sites that dealt with petticoat punishment. He even found a chat room where males who liked to wear women's things could meet and chat. Although definitely underage, he decided to go in and see what he could learn. When asked for his screen name, he thought for a minute or so and then entered Janet. Josh decided, right then and there, that when he was dressed he would become Janet. He entered and chatted with others who seemed to share his newfound passion. When he realized how late it was getting, he quickly signed off. He did not want to be caught by his mom. He removed her things and then dressed in his normal clothes. He tried to replace mom's things just as they had been. Of course, he could not do it exactly, and later in the day his mom noticed the ill-folded lingerie in the laundry basket, her panties drawer in disarray, and her cocktail dress slightly askew on the hanger. Although she had her suspicions, she said nothing to Josh at that point. However, Elizabeth did start to regularly leave 1 or 2 pieces of her lingerie on her dresser and one of her dresses hanging on the back of her bedroom door to see what would happen. For the next few weeks, Josh was a regular visitor to his mom's room. He would select lingerie and a dress to wear, sometimes wearing what his mom had intentionally set out for him, though not realizing she had done it purposefully. He would then go to his computer, perhaps read a story or two, and then wind up in the chat room. He soon discovered that those that enjoyed women's apparel ran the gamut, from the simple crossdresser such as himself to the full-fledged sissy to a wife, girlfriend, or mistress. After he ended each computer session, he would reluctantly change clothes and try to put everything back as he had found it. Usually, there was a slight difference that Elizabeth could and usually did detect. One day, prior to leaving for work, Elizabeth left a white satin ankle-length nightgown and matching robe hanging on her door. She had just purchased this set especially for her son, if he wished to wear it. On her dresser, she placed a new lacy white satin bra, white satin garter belt, and a pair of matching panties and a pair of black seam stockings, also purchased at the same time the negligee set was purchased. She left a pair of fluffy white mules on the floor in front of the dresser. All of these items were meant to be pleasing both to the eyes and to the touch. She was hoping that Josh would not be able to resist the urge to wear them. Later that day, when Josh went to his mom's room to see what he would wear, he saw the negligee set and the lingerie that appeared to be waiting for him. He was totally entranced by these things, just as his mom had hoped he would be. He knew that his mom had some nice clothes, but until today, he had not seen anything that looked this nice. When he looked at and touched both the negligee and the lingerie, Josh just knew that Janet must wear them today. He gathered all of the items up, including the stockings and the mules, and went to his room to change. It did not take him very long to put on these luscious fashions. Once dressed, he returned to his mom's room for the panties he needed to fill his bra and to see the reflection of himself in the mirror wearing the negligee. As he walked to her room, he savored the feel of the satin nightgown and robes surrounding and covering him, as well as the usual tautness of his stockings tugging against his suspenders. He felt so wonderful, and that feeling intensified after he filled his bra with panties and observed the pretty, feminine young woman looking back at him from the mirror. He turned and lifted his negligee to make sure the seams on his stockings were straight. He wished though that he could do something with his hair and had the nerve to wear makeup. After a few minutes of self-admiration and parading around in front of the mirror, he felt that he might need some protection in the event of an accident. He did not want to leave a telltale stain on either the panties or the negligee. Several of his chat friends had mentioned using a maxi pad in their panties, both for protection and to keep themselves properly tucked in to maintain a feminine appearance in their panties. He went to the bathroom and found Mom's box of maxi pads stored under the sink. Josh opened the package, removed the adhesive strip and positioned the pad properly in his panties. It was a unique feeling for him walking with the pad between his legs. He took the packaging and the adhesive strip to his room. He planned to discard them later after he transitioned again from Janet back to Josh. Josh returned to his room and immediately went to the online chat room. He could not wait to tell anyone in the room who asked him what he was wearing that day. As he sat and moved around in his chair, he savored the feel of the bra tight across his chest and the satin panties and negligee caressing his body. He became so absorbed in chatting with two others that he did not hear his mom return home and enter the house. Elizabeth had taken a half-day off to see if her thoughts about Josh and his behavior were correct. She took off her shoes and quietly made her way to Josh's room. Carefully, she looked in and saw that her son was clad in the satin negligee and seemed to enjoy being dressed that way. Without being observed, she was able to move in behind him and notice both the screen name and the private chats that Janet was having. Before she could say or do anything, Josh noticed a slight movement behind him. He quickly turned around and saw his mom standing there with a big smile on her face. His face reddened in embarrassment and he wanted to hide from her. Josh lowered his head, looked at the floor and felt that the world was about to end as he waited to receive his mom's wrath. Instead, she quietly sat down on his bed and said how pretty he looked in the negligee. She mentioned that she wished she could have seen Janet dressed in some of her other things, especially the gold cocktail dress. Mom then asked if Janet was the name he had chosen for when he was dressed. All Josh could do was nod his head in response. Elizabeth commented that Janet was a very nice name and it seemed to fit her. She then asked if Janet liked wearing soft, silky clothes. At this point, Josh managed to regain some measure of speech and started to stammer out an apology for dressing in her clothes and promising never to do it again. He hadn't gotten too far into his halting statement when Mom took his hands gently into hers and said that she did not have a problem with Josh or Janet dressing femininely. If this was what she wanted, then it was fine all with her. But Mom expressed her concern that Janet had borrowed her clothes without permission. Elizabeth felt that it would be more appropriate if Janet, when she desired to dress, had her own wardrobe rather than having to continually borrow from her closet. She did say that Janet could still borrow things from her closet to wear, whenever she liked. Josh was stunned to hear his mom say all of this. He had expected her wrath to come down upon him and to be called every vile name under the sun. Instead, she was offering him the opportunity to be Janet and have her own clothes. With tears rolling down his cheeks, he looked up at his mom's smiling face and asked her if she was serious. Elizabeth nodded and then reached out to hug and to comfort Janet. She stroked his hair while he quietly sobbed on her shoulder. When she felt that he was calming down, she reached for some tissues so Josh could dry his eyes. She then asked if Josh would like to be Janet and dress full-time. He eagerly nodded but asked how it could be done, especially with high school beginning in less than 2 weeks. Elizabeth said that when she first found signs that Janet was getting into her things, she had made a few assumptions and then made some inquiries based on those assumptions. There was a private all-girls school nearby that accepted both regular students and specially attired students. She said that Parkside High School, sometimes known as TG High in the community due to the number of male students who dressed and acted as members of the opposite sex, would be able to accept Josh as a student, depending on his previous academic record. Elizabeth had seen that it was provided to them in a timely manner and had completed the application process. All that was needed was for Josh's feminine name to be added to the application and acceptance was assured. Josh would be Janet every day and dress daily in feminine apparel. She looked into his eyes and asked if this would be acceptable. Janet broke into a big smile and hugged her mom tightly. All she could say was yes. 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 She then asked if Janet would model the negligee for her. As Janet eagerly stood and turned around, Mom commented on how nice the items looked on her and said they were purchased especially for her and were the first items in Janet's new wardrobe. Janet, not hearing what her mom had just said, started to say that these were her mom's when Elizabeth stopped her and again said she had gotten them especially for Janet. This time Janet realized what her mom was telling her. She beamed as she again threw her arms around Mom's neck in a big hug. Elizabeth asked if Janet would lift her negligee for a moment and let Mom see her panties, suspenders and stockings. Janet quickly agreed and daintily lifted her negligee. Mom immediately noticed the feminine bulge in Janet's panties and asked if Janet was using a maxi pad. Janet blushed but assured her mom that she was. It was for protection and for keeping herself tucked in. Mom smiled at how smart her daughter was and promised that there would always be a large supply of maxi pads available for both of them. Mom asked Janet if she had selected a middle name since the school application required it. After a moment's thought, Janet asked her mom if she could use Elizabeth in her honor as a middle name. This almost caused Mom to begin crying. However, she controlled herself and gave Janet another big hug. Elizabeth then mentioned that she had been speaking to a female lawyer friend about quietly changing Janet's name from its masculine form to the feminine Janet Elizabeth and was assured it could be done quickly and quietly and would be taken care of by the time school started. Mom then said that she should go and pick out an outfit for Janet so that they could shop for the new wardrobe that would be needed. She also suggested that Janet should start hanging her new clothes in the spare room closet, which would soon be furnished properly for a teenage girl, including space for the computer, so Janet could continue with her chats. Elizabeth left the room briefly to get Janet a nice outfit to change into for their shopping trip. While she waited happily for her mom to return, Janet removed the negligee and the mules and carefully placed them into her new closet. She felt like this was truly the first day of the rest of her new life. Janet's first beauty salon experience. Although Elizabeth had shown Janet most of the basics of hair care and makeup, she felt that a visit to a professional was in order for a new hairdo for school. In confidence, she had briefly mentioned to Linda, her longtime stylist and friend, about Josh/Janet. This was while Elizabeth was getting her hair done after the first shopping trip with Janet. She was hopeful that Linda would be willing to do Janet's hair and makeup on the Saturday before school opened. Linda was more than willing to do Janet's hair and makeup but suggested that Janet come around to her house on Sunday instead. She had a small salon set up in her basement for neighborhood customers, which she operated some evenings and Sundays. Linda felt that Janet might be more comfortable getting her hair done for the first time there rather than be in the crowded salon on Saturday. This way, Janet could relax and would not feel intimidated or pressured. She could learn the step-by-step techniques that she needed for hair and makeup care. Linda even mentioned that her daughter Megan might help. When Elizabeth looked questioningly at Linda about this, she was told that Megan was 2 years older than Janet and had not shown any inclination toward boys yet. For that matter, she had shown no inclination toward girls yet either. She went on to point out that Megan attended Parkside not because of the dress code, but because she was able to get a good private school education as well as work on her future career as a hairstylist. Before Elizabeth left the salon that day, she made sure she confirmed the time of Janet's appointment with Linda. On Sunday morning, Janet awoke earlier than usual. The previous day, her mom had told her about her upcoming hair appointment with Linda and Linda's daughter Megan. She was excited and eagerly looking to her first beauty salon experience, although she was unsure how a girl near her age would react to a boy in panties and a skirt. Elizabeth had said that Janet would have a shampoo, hot oil conditioning, frosting, set and manicure. Also, Linda would show Janet how to do her makeup and to care for her skin and her new hairdo. The fact that Mom trusted Linda, both as a hairstylist and as a confidant, was the important item for Janet. She was also interested in seeing how Megan behaved toward her. She went into the bathroom, carrying the bra, garter belt and panties, all in pink satin, which she would wear after her shower. She properly disposed of her maxi pad and then removed her waltz-length pink satin nightie and panties and put them in the laundry hamper. Since her first day, one of Janet's chores in helping Mom around the house was to empty the hamper and sort the laundry. Gradually, Mom hoped that Janet would be able to do the laundry completely on her own. She was already hand-washing all of their lingerie. Janet put her pink plastic shower cap over her hair and stepped into the hot shower. Mom had taught her how to shave what little body hair she had and how to use a depilatory cream when necessary. As she washed, Janet delighted in the feel of her soft hairless body. After the shower, she dried off, using one of the big, pink fluffy towels on the bath counter. She made sure to use some of the scented bath talc and then put on her bra and inserted her B-sized breast forms into the cups. When Mom had her first hints about Janet, she had gone out and bought a pair of realistic B-sized breast forms. When her son had said that he wanted to dress and be her daughter, she surprised him with the breast forms she had purchased to give him a proper feminine shape for a teenage girl his age. Mom felt that Janet would not look right or feel comfortable with her bra stuffed with panties day in and day out. Janet had been so appreciative of those from the very first day. Next she put the garter belt around her waist. Finally she put on the lacy, satin panties and the requisite maxi pad. Janet always felt so feminine when she first put on her lingerie. Before returning to her room to finish dressing, she checked her appearance in the mirror. Satisfied with what she saw, she then checked her toenails to see if they needed touching up. The other night, while they were dressed in satin nightgowns prior to going to bed, Mom had helped her do her toenails in a vibrant pink polish. Janet looked and saw that her nails still looked as good as they did the other night. Returning to what was Josh's room, as the spare room was awaiting the new furniture to turn it into a femininely decorated room suitable for a teenage girl, Janet sat on the bed and picked up the taupe stockings she had set out. Carefully she drew the first one over her foot and drew it up her leg. She stood briefly to attach the stocking top to the garters before sitting and repeating the process. She enjoyed feeling the tautness of the stocking and the garter belt as she moved. Mom had said that stockings and heels made Janet's legs look so nice and shapely. Janet put on the pink satin blouse she had chosen to wear and buttoned it up. It had a high neckline with long full sleeves and resembled one she had seen worn by the mistress/hostess of one of the sites she regularly visited online. Janet felt that if she could look half as beautiful as this mistress, she would be quite feminine indeed. She put on a straight gray skirt that ended just above her knee. As she zipped up the back and buttoned the top button, she glanced at the skirt for any lint, which might need to be removed. She smoothed the skirt over her hips and felt somewhat limited in her stride as she walked. Janet then put on her 2-inch heels that matched her skirt. As she was getting her hair and makeup done a little later, she knew that she did not have to take the time now to do them. She sat there savoring what she was wearing, when Elizabeth called to her and asked if she was ready. Picking up her gray purse and putting the strap on her shoulder, Janet said she would be right there. She tied a pink silk headscarf over her hair, since Mom had said that it should be covered until they got to Linda's. As she came to the entry foyer, Janet heard Elizabeth say how nice she looked and that she hoped Janet would enjoy her day of beauty. Janet smiled and said she was ready for it. They drove the short distance to Linda's house, a rancher in a nice development. Elizabeth pulled into the drive behind Linda's sedan. She looked at Janet and asked if she was ready. Janet smiled and nodded, although she did admit to a bit of nervousness. Elizabeth assured her that she had nothing to be nervous about. After all, she was just getting her hair done. They walked to the door and rang the bell. In a few seconds, a pretty teenager dressed in a well-fitted pink uniform, stockings and tennis shoes opened the door. Once inside, the teen introduced herself as Megan, Linda's daughter. She turned to Janet and told her how nice she looked and had chosen a pretty outfit to wear. As she led them downstairs to the salon area, she asked Janet if she would be going to Parkside. When Janet said yes, that she would be attending Parkside, Megan asked if she could be her big sister during her first year there and guide her through the rough and unfamiliar passages of high school. Janet said that she would be happy to have Megan as a big sister at school. As they entered the salon area, Linda greeted Elizabeth warmly and then turned to meet Janet. Her first comment was that Janet was certainly more feminine than many of the new girls that she knew at Parkside. Janet blushed but accepted this compliment graciously. She then noticed that Linda was dressed in the same manner as Megan, well-fitted pink uniform and all. When Janet asked about this, Linda replied that, in her home salon, she tried to maintain the appearance and feel of the 50s neighborhood salons, even though all of the equipment and fixtures were fairly modern. Linda had Janet sit in her styling chair while she fastened a pink plastic shampoo cape around Janet's neck and draped it over her clothes. She then took her to the shampoo bowl and had Janet recline in the chair so that her neck rested in the bowl's cutout. Having donned a pink plastic cobbler's apron over her uniform, Megan took her mom's place to do Janet's shampoo. After making sure the water was the proper temperature, she thoroughly wet Janet's hair and applied the shampoo. She worked up a rich lather and massaged Janet's scalp in the process. Janet sighed audibly at how relaxing this was, which caused Megan to comment that many women found the shampoo as relaxing as Janet did. Rinsing the first lathering from the hair, Megan proceeded to repeat the process. Once the second shampooing was completed, Megan squeezed the excess water from Janet's hair and then wrapped a towel around her head and led her back to her mom's styling chair. Linda had also donned a pink plastic cobbler's apron and was waiting for Janet to return. She smiled at Janet and removed the towel covering her hair. She quickly applied the conditioner and then placed a plastic conditioning cap over Janet's hair. Lastly, the heat cap was fitted snugly over the conditioning cap and the chin strap was fastened under Janet's chin. Once the heat cap was turned on, Janet felt the warmth it generated all over her head. While enjoying the nice effects of the heat cap, she had a chance to look at the decor of the salon. The walls were done in a pastel color, in keeping with this feminine sanctuary. Against one wall were 3 hair dryers with plastic domes. The shampoo bowl was in one corner of the room and Linda's styling station was against another wall. There was a second styling station set up right next to Linda's station. Trays of rollers and perm rods were on carts between the 2 stations. 2 large cabinets were against another wall, one holding towels and the other holding various salon supplies. There was also a small roller table with several bottles of nail polish, apparently for doing manicures, along with a small chair. Posters depicting women with various hairstyles covered the walls. There were also 3 chairs set up, which could be used by waiting patrons. Mom, Linda and Megan, engaged in seemingly pleasant conversation, presently occupied them. Janet did notice that Elizabeth and Linda would hold hands like a couple of lovebirds. However, she did not think there was anything meant by this. At that moment, Megan rose from her chair and came over to Janet. She turned off the heat cap and removed both caps from her head. She led Janet to the shampoo bowl where she rinsed off the excess conditioner and then took another towel and squeezed water from the hair. Megan then had Janet move back to the styling chair. She placed a towel around Janet's caped shoulders and used a big hair clip to hold it in front. A close-fitting plastic cap was placed over Janet's head and hair. While making sure it provided a tight covering, Megan explained that this was a frosting cap. She tied the ends of the cap in a pretty bow under Janet's chin. Picking up a small hook, she proceeded to pull strands of hair through the cap. Linda would monitor Megan to make sure she was doing it properly. When Linda determined that enough of Janet's hair had been pulled through the cap, she had Megan lay the hook aside. Linda put on plastic gloves and picked up a bowl of liquid and a small brush. She proceeded to cover the top of the cap and all of the hair that had been pulled through the cap with the liquid. She explained that this was the frosting and would give Janet's hair nice highlights and contrast. A plastic cap was placed over the frosted hair and Linda led Janet to one of the domed hair dryers. The dome was lowered over Janet's head and the air turned on. Janet sat under the dryer savoring each step in her salon process. Megan came over and handed Janet a ladies' magazine to read while she was under the dryer. Janet glanced at articles and ads dealing with hair, makeup, exercise and even feminine hygiene. Before she could really start to read any of the articles, the dryer went off. Megan came over and lifted the dome up and led Janet back to the shampoo bowl. She also had on plastic gloves as she removed the plastic cap and rinsed off the excess. Finally, she carefully removed the frosting cap and returned Janet to Linda's station. As Linda rolled Janet's hair, she explained that Elizabeth had wanted a basic, low-maintenance hairstyle for Janet. Linda felt that the style she was creating would satisfy this. Once her head was covered with rollers, Janet had a pink hairnet tied over them. She was again led to the dryer and seated under the domed hood. Before she could pick up the magazine to read, Megan came over with the manicure table and sat down before Janet. She had Janet soak the nails on both hands. Taking one hand, Megan began to work on the cuticles, cleaning and shaping them. She repeated on the other hand and then started to apply polish to each nail. The same vibrant pink polish that Mom had used on her toenails was now being applied to her fingernails. 2 coats of the polish were applied and then a clear top coat went on to protect the nail and the finish. Megan used a portable hairdryer for quick drying. As she gazed down on her nails, Janet was pleased with their appearance, perfectly befitting a teenage girl. After Megan finished doing Janet's nails, she lifted the dryer dome to see if Janet was dry. She untied the hairnet and then unwound one curl. Satisfied that Janet's hair was dry, she turned off the dryer and had Janet follow her back to Linda's styling station. Instead of removing the rollers and finishing the style, Linda took another pink hairnet and tied it over Janet's rollers. She also placed a large pink shower cap over the rollers, indicating that she was going to first do Janet's makeup before taking the rollers out. Linda carefully applied a little liquid foundation to Janet's face and spread it out so as to provide a light coating over the skin. She used some face powder next. Linda reminded Janet that she was a young teenage girl and, as such, she did not need much makeup. Her use of makeup should simply highlight her own natural youthful glow. She showed Janet how to apply just a little blush to give her cheeks some color and then advised her about using eyeshadow and mascara for school. Lastly, she applied the pink lipstick to Janet's lips that was an exact match for her nail polish. As Linda worked applying the makeup, she also was teaching Janet how to apply her own makeup. Once finished with the makeup, Linda proceeded to remove the rollers from Janet's hair and begin the styling process. She used her comb, brush, styling gel and curling iron to fashion Janet's new hairstyle. She made sure that Janet was facing away from the station mirror, so she would be surprised to observe the finished product once Linda was done. Lastly, Linda picked up the can of hairspray and applied a light coating to Janet's hair. She then turned Janet toward the mirror and asked what she thought. Janet gazed at her feminine reflection in the mirror and was at a complete loss of words. Elizabeth and Megan both told Janet how pretty she looked and that her new hairstyle was perfect for her for school. Janet just simply beamed hearing these words as she gazed at her reflection. After Linda removed the plastic cape covering Janet's body, and the bill had been paid, the two mothers and two daughters chatted some while seated in the various chairs in the home salon. Soon the talk turned to the new school year. Megan was talking about the parkside environment, the teachers, and her fellow students. She said that Janet would quickly feel very comfortable there and would fit right in. Megan also offered to drive her to school, as she had to go right by Janet's house. Janet thanked Megan for her kind offer and asked what time she should be ready. Megan told her and then said to allow for extra time to get ready, as it would be her first day of school as Janet. Elizabeth at last realized how late at the day it was getting and they should be leaving to allow Megan and Linda to get some rest. As they made their way up from the basement salon, it was Megan who first realized that there was a steady rain falling outside. She wondered aloud what could be done to protect Janet's clothes and new hairdo, even facetiously suggesting that Janet borrow two of the salon's shampoo capes to drape over her pretty clothes and her hair. Linda suggested that Megan get her hooded plastic raincoat for Janet, since they appeared to be about the same size. This way, Janet would have a plastic covering for her outfit and hair and could return it to Megan the next day. Quickly, Megan went to the hall closet and came over to Janet with a clear plastic, belted hooded raincoat. She held it out for Janet, similarly to how a man assists a woman with her coat, and allowed Janet to slide it on. Megan watched as Janet buttoned the raincoat, secured the belt around her waist and pulled the hood up to cover her hair. Seeing Janet thus attired, Megan impulsively reached out and hugged her. While she had attended school with boys who wanted to be girls, she had never been involved in one's transition, let alone being a part of the beginning of Janet's new life. As Janet stood there in the entry foyer, one heeled foot placed slightly ahead of the other, dressed in a lovely blouse and skirt, her hair and makeup neatly done and now protected with Megan's raincoat, Megan experienced a rush of emotions that she had never experienced before. Her hug was both spontaneous and heartfelt. Janet responded naturally by hugging Megan in return. She never realized how nice it felt to hold a girl that was her age, especially while dressed very femininely. As they broke from their embrace, Megan smiled embarrassingly and said she would see Janet in the morning. Janet was still somewhat speechless from Megan's impulsive hug, so she simply smiled and nodded. As she walked to the car with her mom, Janet felt the rain hitting her borrowed raincoat. However, she was not concerned with it. Instead, all she could think about was Megan. It was the first day of school and Janet was excited about the prospects of wearing feminine apparel to class, although her choice of attire was limited. All freshman girls, either by gender or apparel, had to wear a blue uniform dress each day. The dress had short sleeves trimmed in white, a white Peter Pan collar, a fitted bodice and a full skirt that fell to just below the knees. A white cardigan sweater could be also worn over the uniform dress. Black and white saddle shoes and white lacy socks were worn on the feet. Nude stockings could also be worn in addition to the shoes and socks. Each girl was expected to carry a blue purse with a shoulder strap with whatever necessities she chose to carry. Regardless of the uniform code, Janet was still thrilled at the prospect of wearing a dress to class. On top of that, she now had a big sister who would help guide her through her freshman year. Megan had seemed quite excited yesterday at the end of Janet's hair appointment. At least Janet thought that Megan's spontaneous hug was because she now had a little sister to guide through school. For a brief instant, Janet hoped it might be more than that. However, she realized that Megan was 2 years older than her and might not have those types of feelings toward her. Still, she could hope and dream. Janet did not spend too much time on her bathroom routine, showering while wearing her plastic cap to protect her hair. After drying off and applying her bath talc, she wrapped a towel over her, just like she had seen Elizabeth do on many occasions, and returned to her room. She put on her lingerie and stockings and then sat at her vanity to do her makeup. As she applied the cosmetics, she tried to remember Linda's teachings from the day before. She hoped that she had heard the instructions properly. Sitting there, loving the feeling of the pull of her stockings against the garters, she was happy that her mom had convinced her to wear stockings instead of pantyhose. She felt she would have missed out on this experience had she just worn pantyhose. Besides, Mom had implied that stockings and garters were more feminine and sexy than pantyhose. As she put the finishing touches on her face, Mom came in to see how she was doing and if she needed any help. Mom watched as Janet finished and then complimented her daughter on the nice job she did with a still unfamiliar task. Elizabeth took the uniform off of the hanger and held it out for Janet to slide over her head. As she stood behind her new daughter to zip up her uniform, she felt that this turn in Josh's/Janet's life would be a wonderful experience for both mother and daughter. She didn't have long to muse over this thought when they heard the doorbell, announcing the arrival of Megan. Janet put her purse over her shoulder, picked up the books that they had already bought and went to greet Megan. Mom asked if she had everything she needed in her purse. Janet smiled and said she had everything, even a few extra maxi pads, just in case. When Janet opened the door, she saw Megan standing there dressed in a silky blouse, a straight skirt and heels. As a third-year student, she had more latitude in the choice of her attire for school. Still, there were limitations as to what she could wear as defined in the school's dress code. She looked very nice as she greeted Janice and Elizabeth. With Megan providing a few pointers, Janet carefully got into the passenger seat of the car while keeping her uniform neat. During the short ride to school, Megan tried to reassure Janet about how nice she looked, how she would fit right in and what to expect the first day of class. She said she would meet her after the last class and see how Janet survived her first day of school. Janet walked to her new classroom, unsure of how she would be received by her classmates, especially the real girls. During the day, while attending class, Janet observed many of her new classmates. Some of the girls were obviously not girls at all. Their features were such that, even with makeup and a nice hairdo, they still looked like boys wearing dresses. Some of the girls were there enjoying the experience of their first day in high school, even though it was obvious that they were boys. Others, who either could or could not pass, seemed to dread everything associated with the school, including the wearing of a dress and lingerie. Although these girls stayed mostly to themselves, Janet did have the chance to talk with a few of them while they changed classes. Each of these girls, it seemed, was being forced to be a girl by a strict mother or in some cases an aunt or a stepmother. None of them had any desire to be dressed the way that they were. A third group seemed to have a quiet assurance and grace about themselves. They moved with a degree of confidence and had no doubts about their femininity. In observing these girls, their actions and mannerisms, one did not know if they were new girls or genetic girls. Janet seemed to quickly gravitate toward these girls during the day and started to build friendships with several. One of the classes that first day was physical education. None of the girls had purchased gym uniforms yet, as the school had advised waiting until after the first class. During the class, the instructor defined what would be accomplished during the school year. A locker would be assigned to each girl for her to store her clothes and gym things in. During gym, bras and panties were to be worn. Also, each girl would wear a green one-piece gym suit with short sleeves, a belted waist and elastic leg openings, white socks and sneakers. After class, all girls would be expected to shower in the common shower area. This sent a low buzz of comments and some excitement through the girls. For some reason, it did not bother Janet. In a way, she had almost expected it. Also, she had gym right before lunch, so she would not be in a hurry to get to her next class. She did know that among her gym supplies stored in her locker would be a pretty shower cap and a box of maxi pads. The rest of the day was uneventful, except for the making of some new friends. In addition to the regular academic subjects, each girl would take an elective. For the first 3 quarters, the electives could be from home economics, secretarial/business training, or cosmetology. Last quarter electives had to be in math or science. If a student desired, her last year at Parkside could be devoted to concentrated study in one of the elective areas. During the first class of the day, the girls were given an overview of the electives and told that they had to make a first, second, and third choice of electives by Friday. By the end of the class, Janet had already made up her mind about the courses she would be taking as her electives. She wanted home economics, so she could learn how to cook and sew. She also wanted to take secretarial/business training to prepare her for a career in cosmetology, to improve her techniques in doing her hair and makeup. As she walked to her next class, she fell in step with another first-year student who introduced herself as Lillian. She said she was a new girl, not a genetic one. She then asked Janet whether she was new girl like herself or was she a genetic one. Janet blushed as she admitted that she also was a new girl. Lillian looked at her and said she was very pretty and that no one who did not know otherwise would ever guess she was anything but a genetic girl. This caused Janet to blush even more. They talked about the electives that they would take and were pretty much in agreement on what they would take, if available. By this time they had arrived at their class. Lillian smiled and said she would see Janet after class. At lunch that day, 2 other girls, Kathleen and Sarah, who were also new girls, joined them. During lunch, each one briefly told her story of how she became a Parkside student. When they were younger, her older sister, Karen, had dressed Kathleen up once as they played house. This one instance soon became a regular routine, with Kathleen sometimes requesting that they play house again. They decided it would be their own private secret, with Kathleen regularly being dressed femininely in his sister's clothes by Karen. Eventually, Kathleen's mom found out about the dressing-up games these two were playing. Instead of being upset about her son in a dress, she asked if Kathleen would like to live full-time as Karen's little sister. Upon hearing their moms say this, both girls thought this would be great if it could be done. Kathleen soon had a new, femininely appointed room, similar to Karen's room in a new house in a community where no one knew them. Her mom's boss, a lawyer, had quietly arranged for a name change and birth certificate for Kathleen, and for the past few years she and Karen had truly been sisters. Both had been schooled in the community school, where gender was never an issue. It then followed that Kathleen would attend Parkside, where she could continue her education and her natural gender would again not be an issue. Sarah said that she had started dressing after exploring her mom's room, closet, and dresser. She was totally taken by the look and feel of all of her mom's pretty things and started to try them on. One day, after months of wearing them, she had been caught by her mom while dressed femininely. Needless to say, her mom was very angry and did not think that it was right for Sarah to be wearing dresses and lingerie. She tried everything to humiliate Sarah and make her cease wearing feminine apparel, from making her wear little girl dresses to embarrassing her by being taken shopping as a boy for girls' clothes. In each store, her mother would tell everyone that all of the pretty lingerie and dresses she was buying were for her son, who simply adored soft, lacy apparel. She even had him try on things in the store and model them for the salesladies and all of the mothers and daughters that were shopping there. This naturally brought some comments from some mothers and laughs from others as they saw Sarah dressing as a girl. Nothing, not even the spankings she received while dressed as a girl, could deter Sarah from wearing feminine attire. After months of trying to effect a change in her attitude, Sarah and her mom reached an understanding that would allow Sarah to live full-time as a girl. Mom had enrolled Sarah at Parkside both for the education and for the fact that the other students would not harass Sarah because she was a boy in a dress. Lillian said that her earliest memories were of wearing pretty dresses and having pretty ribbons and bows in her long, curly hair. She even had pictures of her as a young child wearing dresses. Her father did not approve of Lillian as a girl, but her mother was strong-willed and prevailed. However, as she grew older, her mom, who had really wanted a daughter, began to feel guilty about keeping her son in dresses. By the time he was ready for kindergarten, the dresses and other feminine things had all been put away and his hair had been cut into a little boy's style. Mom was very sad when her son began school. She was also sad because she had recently lost her husband in an auto accident. The comfort that she had received from him and the enjoyment of having a daughter were both lost to her within a very short time. Lillian, as it turned out, was also sad, for she had become accustomed to dressing and acting as a little girl. By the time she entered the 4th grade, she could not bear her sadness any longer, nor could she bear seeing how sad her mom looked when they were together. She went to her mom and asked if she could wear her pretty dresses and be a girl again. After a long heart-to-heart talk, with Mom explaining why she had initially dressed Lillian as a girl and Lillian, in turn, stating that she liked being Mom's little girl once and wanted to be so again, it was decided that Lillian would be dressed full-time by her mom and be homeschooled. Since Mom had been left financially well off from the accident settlement, she was able to serve as Lillian's teacher, both in educational areas and in growing into a woman. Of course, Lillian excelled in both areas. This worked out well until it was time for high school, at which time Lillian was enrolled at Parkside to complete her education. She was very thrilled to be able to be in a dress or other feminine apparel all day and night. She was also delighted to once again be the little girl that her mom had wanted and desired. Janet went last and explained how she had begun dressing just recently in her mom's things. Once confronted, Janet was ready to swear that she would never dress again, only to be consoled by her mom that it was all right. Arrangements could be made for her to attend school dressed as Janet, which was why she was now able to attend Parkside. She also said that, based on the experiences of the others, and length of time dressing, she guessed that she was the youngest of the new girls. Kathleen said that, while that may be true, she thought that Janet was very pretty and feminine. Janet blushed as the other girls agreed with Kathleen. Lillian then asked if her hair had been professionally done. Janet admitted that her mom's hairstylist, Linda, and Linda's daughter Megan had done her hair in their home salon the day before. When Sarah expressed a dreamy wish to have her hair done in a salon, Janet said that Megan, a genetic girl, attended Parkside and Sarah could ask her if it was possible to get an appointment with her mom for a new hairdo. Lillian and Kathleen also asked if there was any way Linda could do them also. Janet was unsure but said that they could meet Megan after school and see what she said. When the day was over, the 4 new friends walked out together. Megan smiled as she saw that Janet had already made some friends at school. Of course, Janet introduced each of the girls to Megan. Although all were somewhat tongue-tied to ask, Sarah finally had the courage to ask if there was any way that her mom would consider having her as a client. This prompted Kathleen and Lillian to chime in also. Megan said she would ask her mom that evening and then tell Janet in the morning who, in turn, could tell them. They all thanked Megan and left. The next morning, Megan said that her mom would be glad to do the hair of her 3 friends. She gave Janet business cards from the in-home salon and said that the girls should call her mom so that there would be no missed communication or confusion. Janet was grateful that Megan and Linda would do this for her new friends and said so. Megan smiled and said that the more home clients they had, the more practice she would get using her cosmetology skills. She intended to be a hairstylist just like her mom. Janet knew that when she told the girls that it was all right with Linda that she would have 3 very happy friends. Made for a day, or more, since her first official day dressed as a girl, when Mom had discovered her wearing the new negligee while seated at the computer, Janet had been assisting more and more with the household tasks. She would do all of the laundry, properly sorting by color and fabric. The lingerie, both hers and Mom's, she learned to properly do by hand. With her cooking classes in home economics, she could prepare dinner for the two of them. Granted, it would not rival the meals that could be prepared by a cordon bleu chef, but it was both healthful and nutritious. Mom appreciated the fact that she could leave Janet a suggestion of what to fix for dinner and know that it would be done shortly after she got home from work. Additionally, Janet would do some light dusting during the week and then help her mom do whatever house cleaning was needed on Saturday. The first time Janet helped clean the house, she really didn't have a suitable outfit to wear. When she came into the kitchen that morning, wearing one of her soft blouses and a skirt, Elizabeth looked at her and just shook her head in disbelief. She told Janet that she was dressed as if she were going shopping instead of doing the cleaning. If she was going to clean, she needed to wear something else. Mom went to her closet and found an old pink printed satin housecoat that Janet could wear for today. At the same time, Elizabeth made a mental note to get 2 maids' uniforms for Janet, one being a gray cotton uniform dress trimmed in white with a plain white apron and the other being the frills, apron, cap and black satin associated with the traditional image of the French maid. She knew that Janet had a natural curiosity and interest in dressing as a French maid based on some of her comments after she chatted with those who loved being dressed as a French maid. She knew a seamstress who would do a nice job on the uniform and accessories and also be reasonably priced. Returning to the kitchen, she handed the housecoat to Janet and said that, for today, this would have to serve as her maid's uniform. She also suggested that Janet wear a pair of sensible shoes, either flats or ones with a very low heel. Janet changed out of her blouse and skirt and put on the pink print housecoat and a pair of flats over her stocking-covered feet. When she came back to the kitchen, she found Mom dressed in denim jeans and a cotton blouse, with a print scarf tied over her head to protect her hair. Mom had another scarf and tied it behind Janet's head so that her hair would also be protected. She gave Janet a pair of lightweight cotton gloves to provide some protection for her hands and nails. Together they worked, doing the required cleaning throughout the house. Elizabeth told Janet that the light dusting done during the week made the task much easier on Saturday. She said that she was happy that Janet had begun to dust after coming home from school. The following Saturday, Janet awoke at her usual time to find the gray maid's uniform hanging on the door. After getting cleaned up, she put on her usual satin lingerie and then donned the cotton uniform. She also found, pinned to her uniform, a white ruffled dust cap for her hair. Even though she was helping to clean the house, she still wanted to feel feminine, so she applied a little makeup to her face. With the dust cap and the uniform, she looked somewhat like the day maids pictured in many stories. When she went to the kitchen, she found her mom was dressed the same way. Janet smiled and teased her mom, saying that, while she thought mother and daughter dresses were a delightful idea, she had no idea that the gray uniforms would turn out to be their matching outfits. Elizabeth smiled and said that, perhaps for Mother's Day, they would wear nice matching dresses. In school on Monday, Janet talked with Lillian, Sarah and Kathleen about her cleaning experience and about wearing the gray maid's uniform. Lillian spoke up and said that she had always dreamed of wearing a lovely French maid's uniform to help her mom do the cleaning. She had even dropped several broad hints to her mom indicating that she would love a French maid's uniform, but still she just wore jeans, a blouse and her scarf, as her mom seemingly turned a deaf ear to Lillian's request. Kathleen dreamily sighed at the thought of being dressed in black satin with high heels and starched petticoats, as Sarah nodded her head in agreement. She said she and her sister Karen had approached their mom about the possibility of getting French maids' uniforms for the two of them. Her mom said she would consider it. Even Janet admitted that being a French maid was something that she had always desired to be. She hoped that one day Mom would see fit to buy her that lovely satin uniform. When the next Saturday arrived, Janet again expected to find her gray uniform dress hanging on the door in the same manner as last Saturday. Instead, there was an opaque garment bag hanging there and her mom, in her gray uniform, standing there in her doorway with a big smile on her face. When Janet asked what was in the garment bag and where was her gray uniform for doing the house cleaning, her mom just smiled even more and told Janet to hurry through her morning routine. She would find out the answers to her questions after she had cleaned up. Janet was very surprised by her mom's comments, and this stimulated her curiosity. Quickly, she completed her morning bathroom routine, put on her white satin lingerie and returned to her bedroom. Mom was still in the room waiting patiently for Janet to return. When she saw Janet, she smiled and said that she hoped her new uniform pleased her and pointed to the garment bag. Janet unzipped the bag and removed a beautiful black satin French maid's uniform. When she saw it, she squealed with delight and hugged her mom, telling her that it was lovely and it was something that she had wanted in her closet from the beginning. Mom told her that there was still more than just the uniform in the garment bag. Upon hearing this, Janet looked into the bag and removed the other items. She found a pair of white satin bloomers with pretty ribbons around the elasticized leg openings and 2 short, starched petticoats to wear under her uniform. She smiled and said that with these petticoats and her uniform, her new bloomers would be visible whenever she bent over or stretched. Elizabeth smiled and agreed with her, saying that it would be difficult to be modest wearing her new apparel. Additionally, Janet found a lacy white apron, a maid's cap, 2 pair of black seam stockings, and a pair of 4-inch black patent heels. Her mom smiled and said that she thought Janet would appreciate her new outfit. Janet went and hugged her mom. Janet was so pleased with the new clothes that she wanted to put them on right away. Mom suggested that, for today, she simply wear the satin bloomers over the panties that she was already wearing. She sat on her bed and carefully put the seam stockings on and attached them to her satin suspender belt. She stood and turned so that Mom could tell her if her seams were straight or not. After getting the stockings on, Janet slid the bloomers up her stocking-covered legs into position. Next she put on the heels, which made Janet's legs look long and taut. She stood and walked around making sure that the heels fit properly. She then laid the petticoats on the floor and carefully stepped into the center of them, drawing them up around her waist. Elizabeth helped to secure both petticoats and then straightened them out. Janet removed the black satin uniform from the hanger and slid it over her head and down her body. Mom stepped behind her and zipped up the back and then helped in tying a large bow in the apron streamers after Janet had put the apron on. Janet carefully sat in front of her vanity so that her mom could pin the lacy cap to her hair. When she stood and looked at her reflection in her full-length mirror, she was both surprised and pleased with how nice she looked. Mom came to her and hugged her and asked if Janet liked her new uniform. Of course, Janet absolutely adored it and thanked Mom for it. After doing a curtsy to her mom, she turned and lifted the hem of her uniform and petticoats so she could see her pretty new bloomers peeking out. Even though they were about to begin their weekly house cleaning, Janet felt very sexy as she looked in the mirror and saw the edges of her bloomers peeking out under her petticoats and uniform. Mom asked if Janet had a favorite color. Perhaps later, she hinted, there might be another uniform and matching lingerie for her in that favorite color. Although the house cleaning that Saturday was as time-consuming as it was on any other Saturday, to Janet, the time fairly flew by as she did her tasks while listening to her heels click on the tile or hardwood floor. It almost seemed as if she were seeking any reason to stretch or to bend and thus show off her bloomers. When they were almost done with the cleaning, the doorbell rang. Elizabeth, in the midst of washing the kitchen floor, asked Janet to answer the door. She gracefully walked to the door in her heels and opened it. As soon as the door was opened, Janet saw Megan standing there. Megan let out a gasp when she saw Janet standing in the doorway in her maid's uniform. As she was ushered into the living room, she smiled and told Janet how pretty she looked, even more so than usual, even with her bloomers visible below the bottom of the uniform skirt. Although she blushed, Janet appreciated Megan's kind words and proceeded to give a graceful curtsy to her friend. This seemed to fluster Megan even more and she remained silent. Janet smiled at Megan and sensed this momentary confusion. She asked what had prompted this visit. By this time Megan had regained her composure and said that she was wondering if Janet could date. If so, would she like to go out to see a movie with her tonight? Elizabeth, in her gray maid's uniform, had come into the living room in time to hear Megan ask Janet out on a date. She also heard Janet reply asking Megan if it would bother her to date a boy who was dressed as a girl. Megan replied that the clothes did not define the person and that she enjoyed seeing Janet in a dress. As Janet was about to turn and ask her mom if it was all right to go on a date, she heard her mom say that it was fine with her if Janet wanted to go on a date tonight. Although extremely excited about going out on her first date, especially a date with Megan, Janet tried to maintain her composure and told Megan that she would love to go to a movie. It was all she could do to keep from squealing out her positive answer. Megan asked if it was all right to pick her up at 7 o'clock and if she had a curfew. Again, before Janet could answer, Elizabeth said that Janet should be home by midnight, to which Megan assured her that she would be home by then. As she left, Megan squeezed Janet's hand lightly and said that she would be there at 7. Since the cleaning was almost done, Elizabeth looked at Janet and told her to go get ready for her first date. She watched as her daughter moved gracefully out of the room on her heels. Back in her room, Janet removed her uniform, lingerie and heels, making sure to properly hang everything up. She went into the bathroom, removed her makeup and cleansed her skin and showered, making sure she wore her shower cap to protect her hair. After drying herself and applying the fragrant scented talc, she wrapped her towel around her and went to her room to select her outfit for the evening. Janet looked through her closet searching for just the right outfit that would make the right first impression on Megan. Although they rode to school daily, and Megan helped her mom do Janet's and Elizabeth's hair, Janet still considered tonight her chance to make a good first impression. After looking at several skirt and blouse combinations, Janet looked at her dresses. She selected one in green that fit her nicely to her waist and then gently flared into a knee-length skirt. She also selected matching satin lingerie, black stockings and 2-inch heels. Carefully she began to put on her selected outfit. Nervous about her date, she fumbled with her bra for a few seconds before finally fastening it behind her. She again fumbled as she tried to attach her stocking tops to her suspenders. At last, she sat before her vanity and did her makeup. She didn't want to use too much, so, erring on the side of caution, she used less. This tended to emphasize her fresh teen beauty rather than cover it with a layer of cosmetics. For jewelry, she decided to wear a silver necklace, a matching pair of silver earrings and her silver watch. She finished her preparation with a slight misting of her favorite fragrance. She was just about to put her dress and heels on when Mom entered to see how she was faring in her preparations. Janet smiled and told her mom how nervous she was. Elizabeth looked at her and said she would be fine and to just enjoy the evening. She helped Janet into her dress and then zipped up the back. Elizabeth complimented Janet on her appearance and said that Megan was a nice girl to date. She made sure Janet had her purse, some makeup and tissues, her keys and some money, just in case. As Megan would be arriving soon, they went into the living room to wait. Mom noticed that it was raining hard and went and got her large visored rain bonnet for Janet to wear over her hair. She even placed it over Janet's hair and tied it neatly under her chin. No sooner had she completed tying the bonnet on Janet when the doorbell rang. Megan stood there waiting under a big umbrella, wearing a pale blue short-sleeve blouse, a navy blue A-line skirt and 2-inch heels. She smiled when she saw Janet's hair protected with a nice rain bonnet. As Janet stepped out under Megan's umbrella, Elizabeth told them to have a nice time. Janet replied for the two of them that they would. At the car, Megan held the umbrella with one hand and opened the door for Janet with the other. Janet smiled at Megan and gracefully slid into the passenger's seat and fastened her seatbelt. Megan got in and drove to the large movie complex. They were able to park nearby so that they wouldn't have to walk far in the rain. Janet started to open her door but stopped when Megan said she would get it for her. Janet stepped from the car and under Megan's umbrella. Megan teased her about being a girl and dating etiquette, where the girl lets her date open doors and pay for the evening. When Janet started to remind Megan that she was also a girl, Megan said that since she had asked Janet out, she was the one cast into the lead role. Janet asked which of the pictures at the complex they were going to see. Megan asked if Janet had a favorite that she wanted to see. Janet smiled coyly and said that it should be Megan's choice. They went to see one about a young girl who became a princess in a small country and would follow her grandmother and be queen. As they entered the theater, Janet removed her rain bonnet and put it in her purse. Janet sat next to Megan as they watched the picture. During the movie, she loved seeing the princess in the different gowns and dresses. She especially loved seeing the princess in a wedding gown, thinking that one day that might be her. Megan easily slipped her hand into Janet's and held it throughout the movie. Toward the middle of the picture, Janet felt so contented, being on a date with Megan, that she gently leaned her head against Megan's and let out a soft sigh. When the movie ended, they slowly arose to file out with the others. Janet reminded Megan not to forget her umbrella, just in case it was still raining. Megan smiled and made sure she was carrying it in one hand while holding Janet's hand in the other. Both girls seemed oblivious to the rude stares that some people gave them as they walked by. Outside, the rain had ended, so they were able to walk easily to the car without using the umbrella. Megan asked if Janet would like to stop for a soda on the way home. Janet smiled at Megan and said she would enjoy it. They drove to a family restaurant that was open until all hours. Inside, there were several other teen couples, but no one that either Megan or Janet knew. When they were seated, Janet said all she wanted was a glass of iced tea. Megan said she would have the same. They were silent until the waitress placed the glasses on the table before them. Janet took a sip through her straw. She still could not get used to seeing traces of her lipstick remaining on glass rims and straws. They talked about the movie and Janet commented on all of the lovely dresses that the princess wore. Megan asked if she liked the satin robe and pajamas the princess wore in one scene near the end. Janet smiled and said that they were pretty, but her tastes were more toward nightgowns rather than pajamas. In fact, she did not like the idea of women's pants at all. She told Megan that she guessed that they had a place in a woman's wardrobe, but she preferred not to wear them. Janet then whispered, almost conspiratorially, that women's pants did not fit her properly for the way they were cut, especially in certain areas. Megan smiled knowingly as she heard Janet's honest comments. They talked in hushed tones about how much Janet was enjoying being and living full-time as a girl. Megan told Janet that she was really pretty this afternoon dressed as a French maid. This caused Janet to blush and lower her head slightly in embarrassment. They talked for some time when Megan realized the lateness of the hour and that she needed to get Janet home. As they started to walk out, Janet blushed and said she needed to use the ladies' room. Megan also felt a need to use the ladies' room. They went inside and used adjoining stalls. Janet was very careful to lift up her dress and slip and lower her panties before sitting down. When finished, she gently wiped herself as her mom had taught her. She also wrapped her used maxi pad in tissue for disposal and placed a fresh maxi in her panties. After she washed up, she looked at her image in the mirror and felt that her lips could use some lipstick. As she was refreshing her lipstick, Megan was beside her doing the same thing. They walked out of the ladies' room, again holding hands, and went to the car. Janet wanted to slide over next to Megan for the trip home, but the individual seats in the front were not designed for such closeness. In a way, Janet was sad to see the evening coming to a close, for she had a wonderful time. As Megan assisted her out of the car at home, Janet made sure to tell Megan how nice the evening had been and how much she had enjoyed it. Megan said that she had enjoyed it also. At the front door, she asked if she could see Janet again socially. Janet smiled and softly said she would like that. Just before she opened her purse for her keys, Megan put her arms around Janet and gave her a soft, gentle kiss on the lips. She held Janet tight but not too tight. Janet almost melted into Megan's arms and savored the touching of their lips and the mingling of their lipsticks during the kiss. As Janet was being kissed, she felt almost like the princess in the movie as she was kissed by her desired love. When their kiss ended, Janet again told Megan everything was nice and that she enjoyed her first date and her first kiss. She blushed as she mentioned the kiss. They said their goodnights and Janet went in. She closed the door and leaned briefly against it, eyes closed, picturing each detail of the evening. She drifted dreamily to her room and changed from her outfit into a pale yellow waltz-length nightie. After removing her makeup and cleansing her skin, she slipped between the sheets, pulled the comforter over her and drifted off to sleep, dreaming all manner of pleasant dreams about her and Megan. The fashion show. Several weeks into the school year, a notice was posted on the school bulletin board about models being needed for the school's annual fashion show and fundraiser. All of the girls at Parkside were encouraged to support the show in some way. On the ride home, Janet mentioned it to Megan and asked what was involved. Megan told her that several of the area merchants provided the fashions, everything from formal gowns and business attire to lingerie, foundation garments and swimwear. The girls would model these fashions for their parents and friends. Megan even said that she and her mom volunteered each year to assist the girls with their hair and makeup. She cautioned Janet not to get her hopes up too high as there was quite a number of volunteers wanting to serve as models. Janet said that she would still try out for a model on Friday and see whether she was one of the fortunate ones to be selected. She asked if Megan would be there, both to give her moral support and so that her mom wouldn't have to stop and pick her up after school. She didn't want her mom to find out too soon about the fashion show and why she was staying after school. Also, Janet didn't want to get her hopes or her mom's up too high by announcing, in advance, that she was trying out to be a model for the fashion shop. Megan assured Janet that she would stay and offer whatever support she could. Friday arrived all too quickly for Janet. She made sure that she was neat and fresh, that her hair and makeup were properly done, even though she knew she would have to redo them prior to auditioning for the fashion show, and that her uniform was neat and clean. After gym class, she made sure that she showered well, placed a new maxi pad in her panties and used some of her perfume that she had brought with her especially for today. She managed to get through the rest of the day without having any problems. Megan met her outside of the auditorium and offered to redo her makeup and do a brush styling of her hair. Janet sat in a metal chair near the door as Megan used her abilities to help Janet. Once she was finished, she leaned down and gave Janet a good luck hug, told her she looked pretty and said that she would be sitting in the back rooting for her. She told Janet to smile the entire time she was on stage. Janet entered the auditorium and went down to the front and sat down. She noticed that most of the girls there seemed to be upperclassmen since there were only 2 other girls beside herself that were wearing the blue uniform required of the first-year girls. One of the teachers explained to the 30-plus girls how they should enter the stage area, walk to the front center, pose with one foot in front of the other, turn slowly and walk off the other side of the stage. Girls would be evaluated on their poise, appearance, grace, attractiveness, and femininity. Some of the older new girls groaned because they felt that their femininity wasn't one of their strong points. Janet sat patiently and waited for her name to be called. They called each girl alphabetically, by class, which meant Janet would be one of the last ones to audition. As she watched, she felt a sinking feeling in her stomach, as she realized that some of these girls were good and had obviously been in previous fashion shows. She also observed some girls that had no chance but were still valiantly trying to be selected. As the second-year girls were going across the stage, the 3 first-year girls were gathered off to the side by one of the teachers and lined up alphabetically. Janet was the second of the 3, which meant that she would be the next to the last girl to go across the stage. When her name was called, Janet mustered all of the confidence that she could, smiled and started walking across the floodlit stage. She reached the midpoint, paused as she had been instructed, gracefully turned in the 2-inch heels she had changed into before meeting Megan, faced the judges again and then turned and walked off the stage. Once back in her seat, Janet felt relieved that this was over and that she had given it her best shot. The lead teacher stood up to announce those chosen to be models for this year's fashion show, starting with the 4th-year girls first, then the 3rd and 2nd-year girls. When she finished announcing those 2nd-year girls that had been selected, she commented on how unusual it was to have a 1st-year girl selected for the fashion show. She commented that this girl was very charming and feminine in her appearance and would be an asset to this and hopefully future fashion shows here at Parkside. At this point, she announced Janet's name, causing a squeal of glee to arise from both Janet and Megan. The teacher asked to see each of the girls selected for a few minutes to go over some of the details. In the meantime, Megan had moved to the front of the auditorium and was ready to embrace Janet when she stood. Janet turned to look for Megan and was pleased to see her close by. Both girls hugged exuberantly and Megan said she was happy for Janet. She said she would be waiting until Janet was ready to leave. After receiving details about a rehearsal, being asked about the sizes she wore and other details, Janet was ready to meet Megan for the trip home. Throughout the short trip, Megan spoke of previous fashion shows as Janet listened with rapt attention. Since they were later arriving home today, Elizabeth arrived at the same time that Megan drove up with Janet. She stopped the car and allowed Janet to tell her mom the good news. Janet excitedly got out of the car, ran to her mom and began babbling about the fashion show. Elizabeth knew her daughter was excited but could not tell why. She did hear model and fashion show but not much more. She turned to Megan, who had gotten out of the car, for a possible explanation. When she heard the calm and rational explanation from Megan, Elizabeth was overjoyed with her daughter's success. Elizabeth wanted to hear all about Janet's success, but knew that in her excited state, Janet would make no sense at all. She asked Megan to come in and serve as an interpreter, which Megan was pleased to do. Once she heard all of the details, including how Janet did not want to tell her mom in advance, so that there would not be any raised hopes or expectations or possible disappointments, she was immensely proud of her daughter and promised to help her in any way she could. Megan pointed out that the show could use some of the moms to assist their daughters in changing from one outfit to another during the show. Elizabeth was pleased to hear this and said she would call the lead teacher on Monday to volunteer. Megan smiled and said how she and her mom had helped out in the past with hair and makeup. She then realized how late it was, excused herself and left, leaving a proud mom and an excited daughter to discuss the fashion show. Several days prior to the fashion show, Janet had an appointment with Linda in the basement salon for a perm and frosting. Megan had said that if these two processes were done a few days early, the hair would have time to look more natural and there was much less chance of a frizzy hairdo. Mom drove Janet, still in her school uniform, to Linda's. Both went to the door and were greeted by Megan in her pink uniform and tennis shoes. Janet was taken to the basement salon, seated at the shampoo bowl and covered with a teal shampoo cape. Megan went and put on her pink plastic cobbler's apron and then reclined Janet for her shampoo. As Janet sat there feeling the gentle touch of Megan's hands on her hair, she closed her eyes and savored the relaxing effects of the shampooing. She did not open them again until Megan finished and started to towel dry her hair. She was seated at the styling station and then watched as Megan fit the tight plastic frosting cap over her head and tied the ends under her chin. At this point, Linda took over. Wearing a pair of thin plastic gloves, she picked up a thin needle and used it to put strands of Janet's hair through the cap. While she was doing this, she was telling Megan how to do the same thing. Once she had the desired amount of hair outside the cap, she put down the needle and showed Megan how to mix and apply the chemicals. Linda coated the outside of Janet's frosting cap with the solution, making sure to cover all of the strands of exposed hair. In essence, she was not only frosting Janet's hair but also teaching Megan how to do this process. A plastic cap was placed over Janet's hair and the timer on Janet's dryer was set. Megan handed Janet a teen magazine to read while her hair processed. When the timer sounded, Linda removed the dryer dome and processing cap and had Megan rinse Janet's hair. Megan also wore the plastic gloves to protect her hands. Back at Linda's station, Janet felt the frosting cap removed from her hair and then Linda began to put it up on curlers. Once the head was covered with curlers, Megan stepped in and wrapped cotton banding around the outer edge of Janet's curlers and then handed Janet a towel and told her it was to keep any of the perm solution out of her eyes. Linda showed Megan how to apply it so that the hair on each curler was completely saturated. Janet felt the cold liquid touch her hair and scalp. She almost let some of the solution get in her eyes as she watched the process. Only Megan's quick thinking to use another towel and stop the drip prevented Janet from stinging her eyes. Once the curlers were in place, Megan put the plastic bag over them to seal and the heat from the processing. She also put a portable plastic dryer bonnet over the bag and turned it on, providing additional heat for the process. She smiled as she handed Janet a magazine and set the timer. When the timer went off, Megan removed both the dryer bonnet and the plastic bag and took Janet to the shampoo bowl to rinse the perm solution out and apply the neutralizer. Once the neutralizer had been rinsed out and Janet's hair lightly dried, she was again taken to Linda's station for her roller set. Under Linda's watchful eye, Megan did Janet's set so that her hair would have soft gentle waves and a slight hint of a curl rather than the complete curly look. Linda explained that, since Janet was the youngest in the fashion show, she could wear a style that reflected her natural beauty, youth and innocence. Megan tied the hairnet over the rollers and placed Janet under the dryer. As she sat under the dryer and looked out through the plastic domed hood, Janet realized that, no matter how often she experienced it, she still savored all parts of the beauty salon event. With the last of the style completed and the application of hairspray, Megan finished up Janet's new style, which Janet absolutely loved. She was very appreciative of both of their efforts. Megan assured her that Janet would be the prettiest model in the fashion show. On rehearsal evening, the main items covered were where the girls would change and how long they had to change from one outfit to the next, where they would stand while waiting to enter the stage and show off the outfit that they were presently wearing and how to hurry back for their next change. Each model was assigned a student to help her change, unless a parent or a friend had volunteered to assist. As Elizabeth was helping, Janet did not need any additional help, which allowed one of the other models to have 2 student assistants. Linda and Megan would have their own cube and would touch up the makeup of any girl that needed it. The outfits each girl would wear were neatly hung in her space and paper tags pinned to each plastic bag identified both the category that the fashion was included in and the order in which they would be worn. Not every girl would wear an outfit from each category. Each girl should have at least one pair of nude pantyhose and her heels to wear with the outfits. Black heels were acceptable to be worn. Some of the girls nodded and whispered that having extra pantyhose was always considered to be a wise move. The last point was the jewelry that the girls could wear while modeling. Other than a pair of small, inconspicuous earrings, the girls would not wear any jewelry on stage. The highlight of the show this year would be the modeling of a wedding gown and veil. No one knew who the lucky girl would be who would model this gown, but each one hoped it would be her. Although Janet had her hopes also, she knew that she really wouldn't be considered, because of her age. Still, as she looked over at Megan, she knew that she could dream of being a bride someday. The day of the fashion show arrived and there was excitement through the school. Before classes, between classes and even during classes, all that the girls could talk about was the fashion show. The teachers understood this and were not as strict in maintaining order as they usually did. All of the models were excused from their last 2 classes of the day so that they could make any preparations at home before returning to the school later on. Megan drove Janet home and gave her a light kiss, befitting ones who had been dating each other, and said that she would see her again at school to do her makeup. Janet smiled and exited the car. Inside, she undressed, covered her hair with a shower cap and took a nice hot bath with a nice amount of lilac-scented bath oils. She felt very feminine as she luxuriated in the hot bath. When she, at last, reluctantly got out of the tub, she left her shower cap on while she dried herself with a big fluffy towel. She then used the lilac-scented bath talc and wrapped her body in the fluffy towel. Returning to her room, she went to her dresser and brought out the new white satin lingerie that her mom had bought her especially for this evening. However, she would not be able to really enjoy the garter belt because of the need to wear the nude pantyhose. She put on the bra, making sure her breast forms were in place after fastening it. Before she put on her new panties, she put on the dancer's gaff, which her mom had gotten for her to keep her smooth and provide a nice feminine front. She then put on the matching panties along with the requisite maxi pad. While she was thinking of it, she made sure to put a few extras in her purse, just in case she really needed them. Janet sat and put on her pantyhose, one of her least favorite garments. Pulling the knee-length slip over her body, she paused and looked briefly at what she saw in the mirror. Moving to the closet, she removed the green satin dress with the fitted bodice and full knee-length skirt and put it on. Janet then slipped her 3-inch black pumps on her feet. Next, she selected a pair of silver roses and clipped them to her ears. She and her mom were still discussing whether Janet could get her ears pierced or not. While Janet wanted to get her ears pierced, Elizabeth urged her to be patient for a little while longer. As she was about to put her earrings on, she looked in the mirror and laughed. She was fully dressed but was still wearing her shower cap. Carefully she removed it and took it back to the bathroom and then put her earrings on. Elizabeth was home early and took Janet back to the school. Although calm on the outside, Janet was extremely excited and nervous about the evening ahead. She just hoped she did not get so nervous that she tripped over her own heels. Elizabeth assured her that she would do well and tried to get Janet to relax. Once at school, they went directly to the dressing area, where Janet removed her dress and carefully hung it up. She then moved to Megan's chair, as Megan had promised to do her makeup first, so that it would be fresh for the show. One girl was already sitting in Linda's chair getting her hair taken care of. As Megan skillfully applied the cosmetics, Janet sat and daydreamed about their relationship and where she would like for it to go. When Megan was done, Janet felt that she had been made to look very pretty. Elizabeth was ready to help her into her first outfit. The category was business wear and the outfit Janet would be wearing consisted of a white satin blouse and a black, skirted suit. The straight skirt ended just above Janet's knees. The lace of the satin slip worn underneath could be seen through the small slit in the back. Still, Janet was very attractive dressed as a young business executive. She stood patiently with the other girls, waiting for her turn to go on stage. When the narrator started to describe the perfect attire for the up-and-coming young executive, Janet knew that it was her time to go on stage. Carefully she moved in her heels and advanced to the center of the stage. She turned slowly so that everyone could see the entire outfit. The narrator even commented about the lace of the slip being visible, saying that even a young executive could still be a woman and display the brief, flirty glimpse of her lingerie. Janet then gracefully moved off of the stage to nice applause. Quickly Janet returned to the dressing area, where Elizabeth was ready and waiting with the next outfit. Janet was surprised to see that she would be modeling a lovely red satin bra and lacy bikini panties. She removed the suit and blouse and her lingerie. Elizabeth helped her into the underwear and made sure that nothing was out of place. She then helped Janet into the sheer knee-length red robe, which was a part of the outfit. Janet would go to the center of the stage, open the robe so the bra and panties would be more clearly visible and turn slowly for everyone to look at the lingerie. Once she was dressed, she whispered to her mom about how strange it felt to be walking in front of people in nothing but her bra, panties, and heels. Her mom nodded in understanding and said it wasn't that bad tonight. Janet's second venture onto the stage was again received with warm applause. There were several oohs and ahs as she modeled the lovely lingerie. Her next outfit was a one-piece royal blue swimsuit with straps that crisscrossed her back, high leg openings and a built-in bra to provide the proper amount of support. Once dressed, she made a quick dash to Megan's to have her makeup checked. Seeing how nice Janet looked in the swimsuit, Megan remarked that they should plan a day or two at the beach. She quickly touched up Janet's makeup so that Janet would again look good to the audience. When it was her turn, Janet stood tall, as always, and slowly walked to the center of the stage, paused and then departed once the description of her outfit was complete. The last part of the show leading to the highlight of the evening dealt with gowns of all styles and types. The young lady who would wear the wedding gown as the show's highlight had found out 15 minutes before the fashion show began. She gave a squeal of glee and was instantly congratulated by the other models, although each girl, including Janet, wished she could be dressed as a bride this evening. Janet's gown was an off-the-shoulder, full-skirted with crinolines, dark green satin prom dress. In a sense, it was reminiscent of the pre-Civil War gowns often seen in the movies. Elizabeth tightly laced Janet into a white satin corset with a built-in strapless bra before helping her into her crinoline. Since this was a period gown, Janet also put on lacy white satin pantaloons for the proper look. The only concession to the modern day was that Janet wore 4-inch pumps that were the same color as the gown. The gown was placed over Janet's body and zipped up. Elizabeth helped adjust the gown on Janet's shoulders and made sure that some cleavage was visible. She also arranged the skirt properly over the crinolines. After looking at herself in the mirror, Janet had to fight off an urge to flounce around the room like Scarlett O'Hara, saying in her best Southern accent, "Well, I declare." At the proper time, Janet carefully made her way across the stage and slowly turned so that all of the guests could see the gown from all sides. The narrator described the gown in detail as Janet stood in the spotlight in the center of the stage. When the description was done, she carefully made her way off stage. Since Janet was the last model before the bride, she stood in the wings, along with several of the other models, to watch the bride come on stage and to dream of the possibilities. The wedding gown the model was wearing almost took Janet's breath away. It was a strapless white satin gown with a full skirt and crinolines. It was trimmed with lace and seed pearls over the bodice and skirt of the gown. She wore white satin elbow-length gloves and carried a lovely bouquet. Her head covering was sheer white netting with white scalloped lace edging. It was like a loose scarf or mantilla and fell down across her bared shoulders. In short, she was a true vision of loveliness in white as she stood before the audience. Janet uttered a soft but audible sigh as she looked at the bride. Several of the girls with her in the wings also sighed as they looked at the bride and imagined themselves on their wedding days. Instead of the bride leaving the stage, all of the other models came out and joined her for one last round of applause from the audience. Janet was standing next to the bride, and wanted to reach out and touch the gown that she craved. Megan, Linda, and all of the assistant dressers also came on stage at this point. Megan carefully made her way to Janet's side and held her hand as they received the plaudits from the audience. They both looked at the bride one last time before exchanging a very meaningful look between themselves. It was almost as if each was mentally saying to the other that one day, we both will be brides for the other. The very thought of this caused Janet to glow and feel good inside. She knew, at that instant, that one day, she would be Megan's bride and Megan would be her bride. Janet was looking forward to celebrating her first Mother's Day with her mom. In the past, as Josh, she never really felt such closeness to Mom on this day as she did now. Of course, as Josh, she had expressed her appreciation and given her a big hug, a card and a nice gift, usually something for her bath. This year, though, would be different. Since this would be the first Mother's Day that Janet celebrated with Elizabeth, she was going to be her mommy's little girl and truly dress the part. They were going to celebrate with Megan and her mom and, from what Janet understood, Megan also going to be her mom's little girl that day. She awoke that morning as her mom came in and opened the curtains, letting the morning sunlight into the room. As Elizabeth came and sat on the side of the bed, Janet smiled, reached out and hugged her and wished her a happy Mother's Day. Elizabeth was happy, as she would be sharing the day with a daughter that she already felt very close to. She told Janet that she had to start getting dressed soon, since today she would be wearing a feminine outfit that was different from her normal teenage wear and that it might take a little longer to get dressed. Janet again smiled and pulled the covers aside as she got out of the bed. As she headed for the bathroom, her mom called after her to make sure she was wearing her shower cap today. Janet removed her waltz-length nightie and her panties and put them into the hamper. She also disposed of her used maxi pad by wrapping it in toilet paper and putting it in the trash. After putting on her shower cap, she stepped into the shower and luxuriated as the hot water splashed against her body. As she washed, she wished that she had real breasts rather than having to continually use breast forms. She knew though that she was still young and could have breast implants later in life if she desired them. When she finished her shower, she used a big pink fluffy towel to dry off. Wrapping it modestly around her, she returned to her room where her mom, wearing a lovely, knee-length full slip over her bra and panties, was waiting to assist Janet in dressing. On the bed was the outfit Janet would wear today. Elizabeth smiled and said that in addition to the little girl's outfit for today, Janet should wear her bra and breast forms and to make sure she continued to wear a maxi pad in her panties. Janet was pleased that she would still feel the straps of her bra over her shoulders and the pad snugly between her legs while she was truly being her mom's little girl. She removed her towel and reached for the pink satin bra on top of the pile of clothes. After securing it behind her, she added her breast forms to the cups and made sure that they were seated properly. She then put on the matching satin panties and made sure her pad was in place. Next she put on a pair of white nylon tights. Although Janet was used to wearing stockings and suspender belts, for this occasion she readily sat down and carefully drew the tights up her legs and around her waist. Her mom smiled as she watched Janet pick up the ruffled, lacy pink satin bloomers or knickers and put them on. The elasticized leg openings came to just above her knee and were decorated with bows and ribbons. Janet giggled as she looked at herself in the mirror and then did a little curtsy while dressed in her bra and bloomers. She put on her pink satin camisole and then the starched full white petticoat. She knew that the fullness of the petticoat would make her dress stand out and, perhaps, even show the beribboned bottom of her bloomers. Although normally very modest, for today, Janet was more than willing to have her frilly bloomers show for all to see. Before she put on her dress, she sat down and put the T-strap black patent Mary Janes on her feet. She was disappointed that they didn't have any heel height, but she realized that little girls don't usually wear heels anyhow. Janet wished that, during her younger years, her mom would have frequently dressed her as a little girl so that she would have been able to feel pretty in her clothes and be her mommy's little girl. Lastly, she put on her pink satin party dress with short, puffy sleeves and a waist sash that tied in the back in a big, floppy bow. Making sure she smoothed out the dress under her, she seated herself at her vanity so that Elizabeth could do her makeup appropriate for her attire. Standing in front of Janet while wearing white satin lingerie, nude stockings, and 4-inch black patent pumps, Elizabeth started to transform her pretty teenage daughter into mommy's little girl. She applied a light base coat of foundation and used powder. A little pink blush and a touch of mascara for the lashes were added next. Lastly, pink creamy lipstick was applied to Janet's lips. Pink nail polish had already been applied to Janet's finger and toenails the night before and gave her nails a lustrous sheen. Elizabeth brushed Janet's hair and put a big pink satin bow in the back to set her hair off. She applied a little perfume to Janet. She smiled at her daughter as she looked at the finished product. Janet was truly her little girl today. To complete the outfit, she had Janet put on short, white gloves and handed her a little pink purse. Elizabeth asked Janet to wait in the family room while she finished dressing. She said that Megan and Linda should be here shortly and to have them come in to wait. As Janet was about to sit down, she heard the doorbell and went to answer it. As expected, Megan and Linda had arrived. Megan was dressed in the same way that Janet was, except her dress and bloomers were light blue. Janet smiled and told Megan how pretty she looked. Megan blushed but returned the compliment. Megan's hair was done up in pigtails with matching blue ribbons and her makeup and nail polish was about the same as Janet's. When Janet commented on her hair, Megan smiled and said it took her mom quite a while to get the braids complete. Linda was dressed in a gold satin cocktail dress, fitted to the waist with a knee-length full skirt, matching heels and purse. In her hair, she wore a gold-colored headpiece with some netting hanging in front. Janet, remembering her manners, complimented Linda on her appearance, saying how lovely she looked. Elizabeth entered the room wearing a black satin cocktail dress and a big wide-brimmed black hat that angled across her face. When Janet saw her mom, all she could do was stare and whisper, "Wow." She really felt that her mom looked great, as did Megan and Linda. The adults looked like they were from the stylish 50s while the girls were the typical picture of little girls in pretty dresses that didn't quite cover their bloomers. In the car, Megan and Janet sat in the back while the moms sat in the front. Even though they had been dating for a while, Megan and Janet acted shy around each other. It may have been that they were not used to seeing each other in such soft, frilly outfits, obviously designed to represent a much younger age. Megan finally reached out and touched the edges of Janet's frilly knickers. She smiled and said how nice the material felt and wondered if Janet liked wearing them. Janet assured her that she did and then touched Megan's knickers, asking her the same question and receiving the same response. Janet ached to be held in Megan's arms, kissing her girlfriend, but knowing that today was Mom's Day and she didn't want to spoil it. Still, the desire to touch Megan and have Megan touch her was intense. They arrived at the upscale restaurant and had the car parked by the valet. As they walked inside, Janet could hear Linda's and Mom's heels hitting the ground, while wishing she had heels that made the same sound as she walked. The hostess greeted them with a smile and showed them to their table. She commented on how pretty both of the girls were. After ordering, the two women and two teens chatted amiably. Several times before and during their meal, they were politely interrupted by older couples, especially the women, who first complimented Elizabeth and Linda on wearing hats, which were almost extinct among today's women. They then commented on how nice it was to again see young girls in old-fashioned attire. This caused both Megan and Janet to blush, which received further praise for them. The common sentiment expressed was that it was nice to see that, in today's world, some young ladies still knew how to blush. After the check was paid, the foursome decided to visit the ladies' room. While Janet had been using the ladies' room since she began dressing, this was the first time that she went with her mom. Megan was used to it and simply held Linda's hand as they made their way. Janet reached out and took her mom's hand, looked at her and smiled. Elizabeth seemed so very happy today and Janet was glad that she had been able to do something that gave her mom pleasure. Using the stalls was quite another matter for both Megan and Janet. For Janet, it was raising the starched petticoat and dress and holding them out of the way, while she sat gracefully like a woman and did what was necessary. Her mom had taught her about how a woman takes care of herself when she is finished and Janet followed these instructions perfectly. As they washed and checked their images in the mirror, both women felt that their girls needed their lipstick freshened. Neither one minded as they stood patiently while their lips were again covered with pink lipstick. Leaving the restaurant, the girls noticed that they both received more than the normal amount of admiring glances from both the teenage male patrons and the valet staff. Both girls smiled at the approving admiration that they were receiving. Next it was on to a young people's concert. Both girls were feeling somewhat silly, so they held hands and skipped as they went into the concert hall. During the concert, they were seated beside each other and held hands in the dark theater. As it turned out, both Linda and Elizabeth were also holding hands as they listened to the music. Janet was almost to the point of putting her head on Megan's shoulder, but she decided that there would be another time for them to snuggle. Once the concert was over, they made their way to the car and returned to Janet's house. Elizabeth told the girls to enjoy a movie while she and Linda occupied themselves elsewhere. Megan and Janet looked at each other in a surprised but soon understanding glance. They assured their moms that they would be all right in the family room. As Linda and Elizabeth disappeared, both girls giggled at what they had just learned about their moms. They sat, snuggled on the couch, enjoying a movie while their moms were busy doing other things. When Elizabeth and Linda finally reappeared, they both seemed to have a glow about them. Megan gave Janet a kiss on the lips in parting and left with her mom. After they were gone, Elizabeth turned and hugged Janet and thanked her for making this the best Mother's Day she had ever had. She said that having her as a little girl, at least for today, was a real treat. Janet hugged her mom, pleased that she was so happy. As far as her adventures with Linda, Janet felt that was a subject for another day. She kissed her mom's cheek and went to her room to get ready for bed. As she changed into her nightie and hung up her outfit, she thought it would be a shame never to be a little girl again. Perhaps she and Megan could wear these outfits for another occasion. She smiled as she thought of the pleasant possibilities. Summer job/summer vacation summertime came, and with it the end of school for another year. Prior to leaving for their summer break, the girls chatted about what each would be doing. Kathleen said that she and her sister Karen had a friend that did fashion photography. Both of the girls would be serving as models and wearing some of the latest teen fashions to be coming out in the fall. All of her friends were envious of her and said how lucky she was. Kathleen agreed but said that, according to Karen, who had worked as a model before, the work was demanding, the hours were long, and the job could be very tiring. Still and all, Kathleen was looking forward to her summer experience. Sarah said that, since her mom grudgingly accepted her dressing, she guessed she would be serving as her mom's live-in housekeeper and maid, doing the laundry, preparing the meals, and doing the house cleaning. Although she was hoping for a pretty French maid uniform, she knew she would probably wind up with several gray, cotton maid's dresses to wear. Lillian seemed to have the most exciting summer in store for her. Her mom had already gotten her a summer wardrobe, which included 1- and 2-piece bathing suits, summer dresses, etc. They were going to spend the summer at their beach house. Lillian told the girls that her mom said she could have friends down anytime. All the girls had to do was call ahead. Each of the girls said that they would try to visit. Lastly, it was Janet's turn to tell of her plans for the summer. She stated that she had gotten a job at the local restaurant as a waitress and would wear a fitted pink uniform each day. No one at the restaurant knew about her secret, and Janet wanted to keep it that way. Since her girlfriend Megan would be working Tuesday through Saturday as a shampoo girl at her mom's salon, Janet knew that she would be busy between work, her tasks at home, and seeing Megan. Each of the girls promised to keep in touch either by phone, letters, or emails. They all were looking forward to getting back together once school started in the fall. Each also said that her first year at Parkside was everything that she wanted and desired. Janet was both eager and somewhat afraid of beginning her job as a waitress. She was thrilled at the prospect of earning money but was concerned whether she could handle a tray full of dishes without dropping them. On the first day, she was up early, took her shower and cleaned up and began dressing in her new pink lingerie that Elizabeth had gotten for her. She was able to wear stockings with her uniform. However, one of the veterans had suggested that Janet also wear white socks over her stockings to provide some padding. Her shoes could be either pink or white. Janet had been able to get a pair of pink sneakers that matched her uniform. Of course, Janet did her makeup, using blush, eyeshadow and lipstick in coordinated shades of pink. Elizabeth was dressed for the office as Janet came into the kitchen. She complimented her daughter on her appearance and asked if she was nervous. Janet smiled and nodded her head. Elizabeth told her to take a deep breath, relax and to try to smile often. It would help her get through the day and would present a pleasant image to the customers. She also told Janet that whether the customer was right or wrong, that individual was still the customer. She hugged Janet and said that she would do well in her first job. They left together while Elizabeth dropping Janet off at the restaurant before heading off to work. Janet met with her supervisor, Mary, and was told that Nancy would be her trainer for the first few days to make sure she knew how to wait on customers. She was also shown where she could leave her purse and coat, if she wore one. Mary stressed the importance of being neat each day at the start of her work shift. She said she expected Janet to look as fresh on subsequent days as she did today. She then took her to meet the other waitresses and to specifically be introduced to Nancy. Nancy was very pleasant and said she would be happy to teach Janet what she needed to know. She was in her mid-30s and had filled out slightly as a result of having 2 children. Her uniform, while neat and clean, did not fit her as nicely as the new pink uniform fit Janet. For the first few hours Janet followed Nancy and observed everything from taking the orders to delivering the food to pouring coffee to cleaning the tables afterwards. By mid-afternoon, Janet was starting to put these lessons into practice, as Nancy oversaw Janet's efforts. By the end of the day, Nancy felt that Janet could successfully wait tables with a minimum of help. All Janet felt was tired from being on her feet all day. Before she left, Janet thanked Nancy for her assistance. The first few weeks of the summer were uneventful for Janet. She worked all week at the restaurant, chatted on the phone in the evening with Megan and looked forward to seeing Megan on the weekends. Since Megan worked Saturday and was off on Monday, many of their Saturday dates consisted of sitting together at one another's house and watching a movie and, perhaps, falling asleep in the middle of it. Neither girl minded that the other was tired just so long as they could be together. Janet was feeling comfortable about working until one day she had a loud, rude, obnoxious customer. It started just after Janet took his order. As she turned away from the table, she felt a playful swat on her bottom from the customer. After she returned with coffee, he tried to fondle her and make various suggestive remarks. When Janet ignored his efforts, the customer became loud and rude. Janet retreated back behind the counter and was silently crying because of the customer's behavior. It was noticed by one of the other waitresses who immediately told Nancy. When she learned what had happened to Janet, both she and Mary confronted the customer. They told him in no uncertain terms that all of the women working there, including Janet, were to be treated with respect. If there were any more instances of his crude behavior with any of the women, he would be asked to leave and not return. When the customer grumbled that he was just trying to be friendly, Mary said that they do not encourage his type of friendliness. Nancy told Janet that she would finish serving this customer and that Janet should take a brief break to compose herself. She smiled at Nancy and was grateful for the opportunity. She retrieved her purse, went to the ladies' room, dried her tears and refreshed her makeup. By the time she returned to doing her duties, she felt much better. Mary, Nancy and the other women working there each stopped and offered words of comfort to Janet, saying that they had all been in similar situations. It reassured Janet that all of the women would come to her defense should another ugly situation, such as this morning, arise. Fortunately, for the rest of the summer, no situations occurred. Even with balancing her job, dating Megan and helping Elizabeth at home with the cooking and cleaning, Janet still managed to get to the beach to visit Lillian. She and Megan and their moms had been in touch with Lillian and her mom. It was agreed that they come down the 4th of July weekend, which would give them Saturday night, Sunday, and the holiday Monday. Lillian teasingly asked Janet if it would be one bed or two for her and Megan. Janet blushed furiously when Lillian raised this point on the phone and softly replied, "Two." Lillian giggled and said it didn't matter as they had enough room for everyone. At her mom's insistence, Janet asked if they could bring anything, such as food, to assist in any way. Lillian assured Janet that her mom would take care of that and not to worry. She did tell Janet that they should bring beach towels and bath towels, but other than that, everything would be taken care of. Janet thanked Lillian and said that they would see her on that weekend. With Elizabeth's help, Janet packed her bag for the beach. In addition to her lingerie and a pretty nightgown, she packed 2 skirts, 2 sleeveless white cotton blouses, her bathing suit, some towels, her cosmetics case and her shower cap. Elizabeth suggested that she include an extra outfit, another bathing suit and her rubber swim cap, to protect her hair if and when she went into the water. Janet agreed and packed the additional items. She also took a small tote bag for carrying things to the beach. They would be leaving in mid-afternoon, enabling Linda and Megan to work most of the day at the salon. Janet decided to wear her denim skirt and a short-sleeve blouse for the trip to the beach. Although she did not usually like to dress without wearing heels, she decided that, for the beach, sandals would be more appropriate. She helped Elizabeth get their bags into the car and then they went and picked up Megan and Linda. As she slid in beside Janet, Megan gave her a light kiss on the lips. Surprisingly, Linda did likewise with Elizabeth. Other than that kiss, the hour-and-a-half ride to the beach was uneventful. Megan was so tired that she snuggled up next to Janet and slept for the entire trip. Although Janet noticed her mom and Linda chatted for the entire trip, she really did not pay attention to what was said. She was more interested in gently stroking Megan's hair as she slept on Janet's shoulder. Lillian and her mom were waiting on the porch as they arrived. They greeted the arrivals warmly and hugs were exchanged all around. The girls were ready to start unloading the suitcases from the car, but the adults said that they would get things set up. The girls could go spend some time together on the boardwalk. Each of the moms gave the same warning to her daughter: watch out for the boys. To Janet, this was particularly meaningful as it was the first time her mom had given her such a warning. They were also told how late they may stay out. The girls walked the short distance from the beach house to the boardwalk. Janet and Megan held hands as they walked, oblivious to the stares of some people who disapproved. Each of the girls told the others how the summer was going so far. Lillian was pleased that Janet had come down. She was the first one of her classmates to accept the offer, although Sarah and her mom might be coming to visit in August. When Lillian mentioned Sarah's visit, she did not sound hopeful. Janet mentioned the customer harassment incident at the restaurant and said how it had shaken her up. She was pleased at all of the support she had received from her coworkers and supervisors. As they walked, they noticed 2 boys following them. Soon nasty comments were being directed their way, especially to Janet and Megan for holding hands. This upset both of the girls, which Lillian noticed. They continued walking until they happened upon one of the town's police officers. At that point, Lillian spoke to the officer, pointed to the 2 boys and asked for his assistance. He went and warned the boys not to harass these girls anymore or they would be in serious trouble. He stood there and watched as they went away grumbling. He then told Lillian that if they had any more trouble to immediately call 911 or, if nearby, speak to an officer on patrol. The girls thanked the officer for his assistance. The rest of the evening was without incident, with the girls stopping along the way for a pizza and a soda. Returning to the beach house, they found that each room had been set it. Megan and Janet were surprised to learn that their moms would be sharing a room. Evidently, Lillian's mom had no problem with this arrangement as her room would be next to Linda and Elizabeth's. The girls changed into their sleepwear and Megan offered to put Lillian's and Janet's hair up in rollers. Both girls accepted excitedly. After Megan was done, Janet offered to put Megan's hair up on rollers also. As Janet worked and the girls talked, Megan was impressed by Janet's skill in doing hair. Each girl retired to her room for a satin curler cover, and then they sat and chatted for a while more before going to bed. The next morning, after breakfast, the girls changed into their swimsuits and cover-ups and headed for the beach. Megan wore a demure two-piece suit in a black and white pattern. Janet wore a green print suit with scooped back and high-cut leg openings. She made sure she had her gaff on also. Lillian was attired in a one-piece suit in navy with red and white stripes running diagonally across the front of the suit. Lillian smiled as Janet noticed her in her suit. She whispered to Janet that her mom had gotten her breast forms, befitting a teenage girl. Janet squealed and hugged Lillian and congratulated her on the wonderful addition to her wardrobe. With totes containing sunscreen lotion, bathing caps, etc., the girls headed for the beach. The moms said that they would be along shortly. They picked a nice spot, spread out their towels and liberally applied sunscreen to each other. Janet commented on the nice tan that Lillian had. Lillian smiled and said it was easy to obtain, just spend every day on the beach. For the next few hours, the girls basked in the sun, getting all uncovered parts of their body exposed to the sun's rays. Around noon, Janet wanted to go into the water. She withdrew her bathing cap from her bag, tucked her hair up and slid the rubber cap on. She fastened the strap under her chin. Although Janet realized this was an old-fashioned cap, her mom had liked it and she did too. Seeing Janet in her cap, Megan commented that Linda had gotten her one just like it. She put hers on and prepared to join Janet in heading to the water. Although Lillian's cap was rubber, it was trimmed with rubber petals. She laughingly pulled hers on, fastened the chin strap and joined her friends in heading for the water. By mid-afternoon, the girls knew that they needed to return to the beach house to get something to eat and to change for the evening. Lillian had said that the fireworks for the 4th would actually be displayed that evening. Gathering everything into their totes, they went back to the house. Before going in, each girl put on her bathing cap and then rinsed the sand off of her. Janet enjoyed the femininity associated with all of her new clothes. However, for some reason, in her bathing suit and rubber bathing cap, she felt especially feminine. The girls changed quickly into casual skirts and blouses. At Lillian's urging, they had a quick bite so that they could leave early and get a good spot in town to view the fireworks. At the mention of fireworks, Elizabeth smiled, looked at both Linda and Lillian's mother Loretta and said that there had been a lot of fireworks around the cottage that afternoon. Megan and Janet heard the soft remark and smiled knowingly at each other. The girls left for the boardwalk, knowing that their moms would be otherwise occupied while they were away. In town, they claimed a bench right at the edge of the boardwalk with a good view of the land and sea areas where the fireworks would be displayed. They sat and chatted until it grew dark and the fireworks began. Megan put her arm around Janet while Janet rested her head on Megan's shoulder. Amidst the numerous ohs and ahs from the crowd as each display proved to be more spectacular than the preceding one, the girls watched and enjoyed the evening. On their way home, Lillian pulled out her cell phone and called her mom and spoke briefly. When she hung up, she smiled at Janet and Megan and said that it was always wise, in some situations, to give a little warning of your return. All of the girls giggled after Lillian said this. They got to the cottage and found their moms in pretty nighties and each with her hair up in curlers. If you looked closely at each woman, you'd notice a glow around each, from some highly enjoyable activity. Each of the girls changed into a pretty nightie and joined their moms to talk about the fireworks while sitting patiently having their hair put up. It looked like a mini beauty salon, with 3 girls getting their hair put up in curlers at the same time. As if planned, each mom put a ruffled pink satin sleep bonnet over their daughter's curlers once she was finished. Janet smiled as she looked at Megan in her pale yellow nightie and her ruffled pink satin and thought how pretty she looked. Janet hoped that she presented as pretty a picture to Megan also. After more chatting and a small snack, the girls went to bed and left the adults by themselves. The next morning came far too quickly for all concerned. Elizabeth and Linda woke their daughters so that they could get an early start to return home. When she was awakened, Janet smiled at her mom, sat up and gave her a nice hug, before allowing the sleep bonnet and curlers to be removed. She then went to take a shower and start to get dressed. For the trip home, Janet chose a sleeveless white cotton blouse and her denim A-line skirt. When she came into the living room, she saw Megan dressed in a similar manner. For as nice as the weather had been when they traveled here and for the weekend, today was just the opposite. The dreariness caused by the rain seemed to match everyone's mood. Lillian was sad to see the girls go since she enjoyed their company for the last 2 days and had provided a welcome change from the routine. Janet and Megan had enjoyed being away from their summer jobs and being able to have a few days to relax and soak up the sun. In their brief time together, Elizabeth, Linda and Loretta had gotten quite close. Seeing the rain, Elizabeth and Linda went to their suitcases and returned with plastic raincoats and rain bonnets for the 4 of them. Each raincoat had a belted waist and a hood attached. The girls put theirs on and then started giggling as they fastened the belt of each other's raincoats snugly around the waist. Lillian got into it also, as she took the rain bonnets and put them on each girl and ties them neatly under the chin. She started giggling when she drew the rain hood up over the rain bonnet. Of course, after doing this, she hugged each girl and thanked her for coming. Taking note of their daughter's actions, the moms behaved the same way. Loretta started giggling as she fastened the rain bonnets over Elizabeth's and Linda's hair. Their hugs seemed to convey much more intimacy than those shared by the girls. Lillian, Janet and Megan all noted the intensity of the hugs and smiled knowingly to each other. As they left, Lillian asked if they could come down again, and Loretta said that Labor Day would give them another long weekend at the end of the summer season. Elizabeth and Linda said they would talk about it and see if it was possible. On the trip home, Janet and Megan snuggled next to each other, oblivious of where they were or that they still had their rain bonnets on and rain hoods up. They were just lost in each other and being with each other. Although the ride home took slightly more than 2 hours, to Janet and Megan the time seemed to fly by. When they got to Linda's house, Megan gave Janet a passionate goodbye kiss and then noticed that her mom was giving Elizabeth a similar kiss. The rest of the summer was uneventful, with work, house cleaning, and seeing Megan occupying most of Janet's time. They did get down to the ocean over Labor Day to spend a delightful weekend with Lillian and her mom. The girls knew that the fall semester of school was just ahead and they all were looking forward to the challenges of the year. After Labor Day, Janet was ready to return to Parkside for her 2nd year. She said her farewells to Mary, Nancy, and all of the other women at the restaurant, hugging each of them on her last day. Mary said that Janet had been a good worker and assured her that she would be welcomed back to the job the following summer if she wished. She could also work weekends or just one day, either Saturday or Sunday during the school year. Janet was appreciative of this offer since it would provide her with some money during the year. Also, she was happy to be returning to school, to be with her friends again. However, she also felt a small degree of sadness, realizing that the upcoming year would find Megan graduating from Parkside. Nevertheless, Janet knew that this year would be a great year.